All right. Well, John McCain passed away. Some kid lost his mind and shot up a bunch of kids at a Madden tournament in Jacksonville, Florida. The and the media suppression conspiracy rages on. This is the Brushfire Mind. It's Sunday night. Buckle up. Let's do this. Alright, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on John McCain, but I am going to go ahead and talk with him a little bit. Talk about him a little bit. I did not like John McCain. Never did. I was barely even aware of him until he failed to run against Obama. But he passed away. I won't say I'm going to miss him. I won't say I feel bad that he passed away. But, and this is really the only reason I'm even going to bother to talk about it, I have seen so much just obnoxious vitriol and invective. People celebrating with memes on Facebook. One with a bunch of happy crabs clapping, celebrating, yay, John McCain is dead. And that's, just stop it. It's not necessary, it's not useful, it's not civilized, and it's not even interesting. It's obnoxious, it's mean-spirited, and there's no value to it. So, the man has passed. Give his family the space and the courtesy that they deserve to grieve. And don't waste your time being disrespectful and obnoxious. Leave that silly shit for the Democrats. Let them jump up and down and celebrate when somebody dies. To remind us that people like Antifa and the Black Bloc and Black Lives Matter and all their other violent wings, the Ku Klux Klan and so on and so forth, let the Democrats be the assholes that they always have been. You didn't like John McCain. I didn't either. But bring it together. Leave the man be. And let's move on. Now, and that really is, that's it. That's all I'm going to say about him. Now, before I move on to something more interesting, I just want to say, hey, I got a Gavin in the audience there. Good to see you back. Yeah, good to see you back. Tell your daddy I said hi. And he ought to tune in, too. I know he doesn't have anything to do in his spare time. Gavin knows what I mean. I do have some respect, Gavin. I have lots of respect. Anyway. So, there was a shooting. A kid, and I won't say the shooter's name. I did look it up, but I'm gonna take a page from my favorite. Well, we'll say probably my fourth favorite Jew, Ben Shapiro, and I'm not going to mention the shooter's name. Now, I'm not obviously a big outlet that's gonna. Gavin, you're not supposed to say that shit out loud. You know, OPSEC, son. Keep it under your hat. Your beautiful red MAGA hat. That's where you hide the secrets. Who? Oh, I'm sorry. He's a squid. Hoo-ya! But there was a shooting in Florida. Jacksonville, Florida, the big Madden tournament I assume it's Madden 2018. I think they're all numbered and dated by the year. I don't know much about the Madden line. I know it's a football game. I don't play sports video games. As many of you know, I'm not a big football fan. My favorite sport is war. I prefer my sport to be, high stakes, as it were. But I'm not allowed to play anymore. Anyway. So kid shows up. Apparently we have, the last report I read, there are 4 dead, 11 wounded. Apparently something about the kid just snapped, killed everybody, or, ran in and shot some people, and killed himself. For precisely the same reason that Shapiro refuses to say the names of the shooters, and I will too. I don't want to talk too much about what actually happened. Here's what I want to discuss. Starting tomorrow morning, first thing. I guarantee you there's already some of it happening. But first thing tomorrow morning, we are going to hear the screeching and ranting and railing of new, renewed demands for gun control. And we haven't heard anything from David Hogg in a while. God knows he didn't open his mouth about the Muslim compound in it was Arizona or New Mexico. If anybody remembers, remind me. I don't remember. I think it's out west, either Arizona or New Mexico. The Muslim compound where they were training kids to conduct school shootings. Didn't hear anything about that out of old David, old Hog boy, or his little commie girlfriend. But I guarantee you that both of them will be they'll be talking heads on every major news network, except for Fox, tomorrow morning. Now, quick aside, it is amusing to me that Fox News is now the #1, not news channel. It is the most watched cable channel, outstripping CNN and MSNBC combined. I think that bodes well for November. And I'm sure you guys have noticed I'm not quite as high energy tonight as I usually am. I might not be with you for too much longer. But hey, Zach. That's a good question, Zach. I don't know. I haven't seen anything about the big pharma angle on this one, but I bet you dollars to donuts. Skinny little teenager kid like that lost his mind and killed some people at a video game tournament. Pennies to pesos, he was on Ritalin, at least. I would honestly be surprised if he wasn't also on some sort of antidepressant or so on and so forth. I pretty much default to an expectation of Big Pharma being a part of any mass casualty event that isn't either a natural disaster or an active terrorism conducted by Islamist moderate Islamists. Yes, that's what I said. Moderate Islamists. Pacifism is the fringe extreme in Islam. Just throwing that out there. I'm not going to go into it any more than that. But first thing tomorrow morning, we will be deluged with the absolute ranting and raving about renewed calls for needs for gun control and background checks, and it happens every time anybody who isn't I'm not going to mealy mouth tiptoe around and try and qualify it. If it is a white male who commits a crime, then you bet your sweet ass the immediate response is all gun owners are criminals and murderers, and all white men are evil monsters. Of course, as soon as you have anybody who is not a white man commit a crime, there's something we don't understand. There's something we missed. We need to be compassionate. We can't understand their plight, their difficult road. Take, for example, this wasn't a mass killing situation, but it is recent. It is very recent. The Asia Argento. Okay, so Asia Argento, one of the first accusers in the Weinstein case, basically founder of the Me Too movement. So this is somebody who's been a vocal advocate for victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault, so on and so forth. Hey Rod, good to see you, brother. So Asia Argento has just been named and accused. She apparently raped a young boy when he was in his mid-teens and then paid him off. And the boy is suing her for his loss of wages. And the claim is actually pretty compelling. He's saying that it is and it isn't. So the claim is that he was making several $1 million a year, and then after she raped him, he was so shaken up, so put aside, that he can only manage to earn $60,000 or $70,000 a year now. And I have a little trouble with this, and it's because I do believe that men and women differ. And I remember what I was like when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And no. Teenage Lowry offered liquor and a good time by a good-looking older woman. That's a no-brainer. And I would go so far as to say that is true for the vast majority of teenage boys. Hey, baby, you want a party? We're not complicated. Especially when we're young. Not complicated. But it's a funny thing about lefties and accusations. I think I've gotten spun off on a tangent here. I'll get back to gun control in a minute. It's a funny thing about lefties and accusations. If you hear a man say that he's a male feminist, you could start the clock. You can start the clock right there. The first time he says it out loud in public, you've got months before his accusers step forward. Because without exception, it seems, Joss Whedon, Kevin Spacey, so on and so forth. Male feminists are actually sexual predators. They're generally, delta male cuck sexual predators, but they're sexual predators. It's a game. They're what the biologists refer to as the sneaky fucker. There's a type of squid. It's a cuttlefish. Where the aggressive males will come in over top and they'll pick their female and then they fight to the bloody death trying to get to the chosen female. But there are some Cuttlefish are shapeshifters. They change color the way like a chameleon, but they also alter the physical texture of their bodies to conform to the shapes and patterns of coral and rock. I mean, their level of camouflage is just amazing, to such an extent as they don't just change color, they actually alter their physical texture and manage some like pseudopodic false extremities. Well, some cuttlefish will disguise themselves in that, using their camouflage. They'll disguise themselves to look like the females when the mating season starts, and they'll just kind of slide in under the radar and handle their business while the stronger alpha males are fighting to the bloody death. And it's a winning strategy. It is an effective strategy. Now, it's not great for the species, because now you're basically your soy boys, your delta cucks, your Democrats are reproducing in larger numbers than the alpha males. And the biologists refer to that strategy as the sneaky fucker strategy. That's every male feminist, even if they're gay. No, Rod, I'm not going to talk about John McCain anymore. I said a few words about him at the beginning of the show. Done. He earned a moderate defense from me, but he has not earned, nor certainly the option is gone now, my respect. So Asia Argento, accuser. The occurrence of this rape that she committed was years before the Me Too movement. So she came out, and the Me Too movement basically started the Me Too movement, ruined lives. And don't get me wrong, I've talked about this in detail before and gone into great depth. I absolutely believe that Weinstein is guilty of at least the majority of what he was accused of. Excuse me. I absolutely believe that, as has been stated by many, many, many people in Hollywood, that is part of the culture. It is an expectation that people have, to such an extent that the casting couch is a comedic trope in films produced by Hollywood. They talk about it, they make jokes about it, they make references to it, that giving it up in the cast, in the director's office or the producer's office, is just the way you climb the ladder. That's how you become, that's how you get to the level of a Scarlett Johansson or Julia Roberts or what have you. That it's just, it is what it is. And I absolutely believe the claims by many in Hollywood that the big names, that the Hillary Clintons, the Bette Midlers, damn it, what's her name? She did the ABBA movie. Meryl Streep's, all those, whether or not they gave it up on the casting couch to get to where they are. And don't get me wrong, Bette Midler is very talented. Meryl Streep, very talented. I still enjoy their films. And I can't tolerate their politics. I think they're idiots. I think they're dangerous idiots. But they do make good art. But the thing about the so-called victims of guys like Weinstein, they're not victims. They're prostitutes. They didn't just give it up. They didn't get raped. Were they coerced? They were coerced in the same way that a young, pretty blonde is coerced when I give her $1 for a cheeseburger at a McDonald's because she's in a uniform at a cash register taking my order because it is a business transaction. It's got nothing to do with my being twice her size or older or in a stronger position of authority or wealthier or whatever. It's got nothing to do with her being smaller than me and in a position of weakness that I'm taking advantage of. It's a simple transaction. She has cheeseburgers and I have dollars, and I would like to trade my dollars for cheeseburgers. Well, you get to Hollywood, you've got booty, and I've got movies, and I'll trade you movies for booty. It's not just a transaction which can occur and does occur. It is a transaction which occurs with such frequency that it is an expectation that people have about Hollywood and trying to get in there. So the Me Too movement, to conflate that with actual sex crimes, with actual rape, with human trafficking, with involuntary prostitution, which is in fact distinct from voluntary prostitution. It is possible for a person to want to and enjoy being a prostitute. I know this is hard for a lot of people. I like sex and money. It's not hard for me to make the leap that someone else could also like sex and money. I'm happily married. Not everybody's as smart as I am, or as lucky as I am, or as discerning as I am. And some people just really, really like sex and money. And guess what, guys? There's a market for that shit. There is a market. And as long as there is a market, as in there is a supply which is demanded, and there is a demand which needs to be supplied, as long as those things are true, no quantity of law will erase that market. So gun control. What quantity of law do you suspect will erase the existence of a supply of firearms and a demand for those firearms to be supplied to? I hear somebody coming down the stairs. It's my lovely wife with a pot of coffee. Do you see? I didn't even have to ask. Wow. Babe. You
said happily married. I figured you need coffee.
You are the awesome. Okay. So just a little aside here. I was having a little chit-chat with some of the boys. Oddly, none of whom, usually a couple of the guys in this bizarre text thread that I'm tied up in, are watching the show at this hour. I'm sure a couple of them will watch tomorrow morning. I was back and forth with some of the boys in a text thread earlier today. My mama is a great cook. I mean, scary great cook. And some of the boys were talking about what a great cook my mama is in the text thread. And I pointed out, oh yeah, my mama puts pork in the cornbread. It is fucking good to be a Lowry. And then Cade, who you often see to my left here, but he couldn't make it. Cade said Ma Lowry is the matriarch of awesome. And that Man, I snorted and I laughed so hard at that. But I tell you what, Mrs. Christopher Lowry, she ain't no slouch. Oh. Ouroboros. Yes, the snake eating its own tail is a really apt metaphor for the Democrat Party at this point. Talk about eating their own. Have y'all heard about the TERFs? Trans-exclusionary radical feminists? Woo! Look that one up for a chuckle. Gun laws, though. Let's get back to that. We're a half hour in. What have I got? We're going to start hearing about it tomorrow morning. It's going to be just infuriating. And we already know what we're going to hear. We're going to hear demands for expanded background checks. All right. Here's the thing about background checks. We already have background checks. In fact, we have background checks, and we only have background checks because the NRA caused it to happen. The National Rifle Association caused it to happen that we have background checks. And I'm against background checks. Not just because they're unconstitutional. But that's the bulk of my position, but I do not support the background checks. Background checks make it harder for law-abiding citizens to purchase firearms. They do not make it harder for criminals to purchase firearms. Let me make sure that this is clear for you. I buy my firearms legally. If I was purchasing a firearm for the purpose of committing a crime, I'm not going to buy one where there's a security camera and serial numbers and a receipt. It's going to be cash out of the back of some guy's trunk, and I'm going to check to make sure that the serial numbers are cleaned off. That is how criminals buy firearms. Your background check is a joke. And it's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional. So, but they're going to demand background checks. Which we already have. They're going to demand that we outlaw these scary, dangerous automatic weapons. Which we have. It is functionally illegal for a U.S. citizen to own an automatic weapon, with the very rare exception of an FFL holder, of a federal firearms license holder, which itself acquiring a federal firearms license that allows you to own things like fully automatic, 240 Bravos, your M249s, your actual M4 or M16 A1s, things like that, or grenade launchers. I would love, just for the look of it, just for the weight of it, just for the kick of a 40 millimeter grenade, even if it's just smoke or a freaking drone net or whatever. I would love to hang an M320 off the end of my M4 here at home. But it's a $500 tax stamp per grenade. It is cost prohibitive. And that's after you get the ridiculously complex federal firearms license. Yes, Rod, there was a shooting today. We start the show at 8. And speaking of 8, we have 8 people in the audience tonight. That's a pretty good number. I mean, I'm not competing with anybody meaningful yet, but That's a good night for me. Glad to have you guys. .302? No, Zach, I think you need to double check that. It's an M. The M203 is the older model. The M320 is the more recent model underslung grenade launcher that has the onboard pistol grip and it's side breeches instead of slide breeches. I'm like 90% sure it's 320, not 302. Because I know it's M203, and I thought it was odd that they didn't just do the flip instead of the full shuffle. And yes, I would love to hang an M320 off my M4. Because it's, for one, it's a standalone. You can shoot it like a damn pistol. Yep. It's alright, Zach. You don't have to tell me I'm right. I have a good-looking woman for that. No, Rod, 320, not 320 shot. The M320 is the underslung grenade launcher that mounts on an M4. Fires a 40mm grenade, and the old M203 just had like a little trigger on the back of it, and you kind of used your magazine as the hand grip to pull the trigger against, and it was slide breech, so you had to slide it open, and often your spent shell would just kind of get stuck in there, and you had to pull it out, which is a bitch because it's hot because you just shot it at somebody. The 320 that replaced the 203 side breeches spring ejects, so it clears itself basically when you open it, and it side breeches, so it's easier to load. It's easier to... Oh, I gotcha. 320mm tube. Okay. But the side breech is much easier to load quickly in a firefight than the slide breech. And then on top of that, the M320, unlike the 203, actually has its own standalone pistol grip on it and a retractable buttstock. So you can actually operate it as its own weapon system. You don't have to mount it on the M4 to make it work. I mean, you don't technically have to mount the M203 on the M4, but I would not want to try and mess with an M203 that was not undermounted. Anyway, so the point: background checks, ban automatic weapons, so on and so forth. We've done this. The background checks are in place. The automatic weapons are already as close to completely banned as you're going to get anywhere, because there's nowhere on the planet that I know of where there are not exceptions to the rule that allow for certain members of society to own basically any weapon they want to, short of a nuke, and even that, it's just a question of money. Now, of course, it's also the case, we're probably going to hear more about 3D printing guns, because, that's completely directly related to one nut job kid going crazy and killing some people. But we'll hear more and more. We'll hear more and more about them demanding things that we already have, which is just ludicrous. Stop wasting my damn time. And we're going to hear, I love this, I freaking love this one. We're going to hear calls, I shit you not, you're going to hear some Democrat or some activist demand that we defund the NRA and cut off all the taxpayer contributions that are sent to the NRA by the government. You're gonna hear them demand that Congress take action and defund the NRA. And I'm going to sit here for just a second and see if anybody picks up on the funny thing I just said before I move forward. Anybody? Anybody? The NRA is 100% privately funded. Every penny that goes to the NRA comes from... That's it. They aren't funded. Every penny that goes to the NRA is from private individuals. I give the NRA money. I'm a lifetime member. They're not government funded. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use that as that's my segue. The NRA is not government funded. But you know who is government funded? Do you know who does get massive subsidies and has gotten massive subsidies from the government? Apple, Google, Facebook, Twitter. Every media company or technology company that has a research and development department. The iPhone would not exist. The iPhone and smartphones in general. Smartphones in general would not exist if it were not for the iPhone. The iPhone would not exist if it were not for heavily subsidized, government-funded research programs allowing companies like Apple, and Apple is the recipient of billions of dollars in this regard, to develop things like the touch screen, and then the multi-touch screen, GPS, the miniaturization needed, the cellular radio technology, and so on and so forth, to include the internet. Don't forget that. These companies have been subsidized by the government. What else do they all have in common? Just like Planned Parenthood, who is... Yep, thank you, Zach. Planned Parenthood is also government funded. Now, they're a little off to the side, but they need to get swept up in the same thing. So before I get into censorship and all that stuff and what's going on here, let me back you up a little bit to the question of the Planned Parenthood case that was decided in front of the Supreme Court earlier this summer. There was a case out of California dealing with alternatives to Planned Parenthood. These mostly faith-based organizations that offer education and assistance in non-abortion options. Adoption. Actual family planning before you get pregnant. Or go ahead and do the right thing and raise your kids because you kind of decided to have a kid. Oh no, I was just messing around having some fun. You kind of decided to have a kid. If you're just messing around, casual sex, having a good time on a Friday night, and you get pregnant, congratulations, sweetheart. That's not different than going to the casino and betting away the house. You made a choice. You want pro-choice, there's your choice. You had a choice, you made your choice, and now you have to live with that choice. Well, there are alternative organizations that try and teach about adoption or actually being a parent. In California, it was the law that those organizations had to advertise abortion. They had to tell the people about abortion as an option and basically advertise for Planned Parenthood. So a Supreme Court case came through, and the decision was that basically you can't do that. You cannot compel that speech. Part of the decision has to do with the fact that Planned Parenthood is government funded. I want to go a little further. If I had my way, if I could change one thing in this country right now, and this is a hill I'm willing to die on. if I had my way right now, it would be absolutely against the law for any organization that receives taxpayer subsidy or any government funding of any kind. It would be illegal for those organizations to make political contributions of any kind. And the reason I mean this, it's not just because there's a clear incentive for one. Okay, so you got, we'll just go with Democrats and Google. So Google contributes a lot of money to the Democrat National Committee and gets subsidies for technology and development. And they don't just get subsidies from the U.S. government, but that's the one that I'm concerned with, of course. So there's clearly an incentive for them, while they're making campaign contributions, to contribute to campaigns which include a platform that includes increasing the subsidy to the company. If I'm giving money to a party and I have to choose between the party that wants to take my money away from me and the party that wants to give me more money, I'm going to give my money to the party that wants to give me more money. I'm going to buy money rather than buy not money. If I have to choose between buying money and buying not money, nothing else, not a cheeseburger, a car, a gun, a happy puppy, just money and not money, then my money is on the money. So, Adam Kroll and Maxie Waters, if you care about underprivileged kids, why don't you care about Plan B? Oh dear. Oh dear. Sorry, I got distracted. Okay, so what's happening right now? Let me break that down for you. If the DNC is pushing to increase subsidies, and don't get me wrong, I mentioned the DNC and the other entities because they are my opponents. They are the oppositions of what is good and right in the United States and the world. I don't like the Republicans much more, but I like them enough. I like them better enough to vote for them to try and slow down the enemy. Republicans are less like politicians and more like speed bumps that we throw in front of Democrats. So, Rod made the accusation that I actually want to end government bribery for subsidization. No, Rod, I'm going to take it a little further than that. The claim I'm making is that subsidy going to companies which then make contributions to the responsible political party is tantamount to that party using the company as a money laundering service in order to embezzle U.S. tax dollars from the federal government. And I'm using those two words very, very intentionally. Look, you look at the Trump collusion conspiracy theory. There's a reason that they keep using this word collusion. It's not because there is no crime in statute which is named collusion. There are crimes which have names that are synonymous with the word collusion. Like, for example, the crime of conspiracy to defraud the government, the crime of conspiracy to betray the people, or the crime of conspiracy, right? Conspiracy to commit crime is a crime. There is no statute that calls conspiracy collusion. And here's why. The accusation of collusion is an accusation not of a crime, but of an activity which they know they can get the low information voter to conflate with a crime that sounds similar. But by using the word collusion, instead of actually making the accusation of criminal activity, the enemy of the people is able to avoid some level of liability for what is no less than libel and slander. The accusations of collusion to date, right? Let's assume here, hypothetical. Let's assume for just a moment, and we're going to have to use this hypothetical at least twice tonight. Let's assume for just a moment that Donald Trump is completely and absolutely provably guilty, that there is undeniable evidence of his crime, and that crime is a conspiracy to defraud the American people through the interference in the voting system of the United States, with the assistance of a foreign power here named as Russia. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that that is the case. But, and that the evidence exists, but has not been discovered, for the sake of this argument, that all of that every accusation is 100% true and correct, but that the evidence has not come forward or been produced. If we stop the clock right now and do not seek out the evidence, then every accuser who has made the accusation of the crime without evidence to support it could easily be held criminally liable for the crimes of libel and slander. Of course, libel is slander in print. So you call him a duty head instead of an asshole, because collusion is not a crime. It seems like it'll be a little bit easier to argue against a claim of slander or libel when collusion is what you go to court with instead of conspiracy to defraud. So, now, for that reason, I am laying my guns out, flopping my dick on the table, as it were. What is happening with government subsidies going to companies which then fund political parties, which then make contributions to political parties? It's not just influence peddling. And I think the Republicans are guilty of this too. But private companies, and it's very clear. It's not hard to pull up the numbers it's not hard to pull up the numbers on who makes donations to whom and who receives what subsidies. It's the paper trail is easily attainable, just a little Google searching, and you can put the pieces together. But essentially what's happening is the Democrat Party, in this case, it's important in this case because we're talking about the censorship situation in a second here. The Democrat Party is funneling money out of the taxpayer's pocket into private corporations who are then funneling that money back into the DNC. Now, if money's going into the DNC, that money is going into campaigns. That money is going into the campaigns for political representatives. People often wonder how, with a salary of only a couple of $100,000 a year, do senators seem to all turn into millionaires in just a few years in office? Well, that's how. Because they're embezzling our tax money. And they're doing it through private companies as the go-between for the money laundering. So, if I turn up tomorrow, ruled a suicide with 2 rounds in the back of my head, I just want you to know, I have never, ever, ever thought about taking my own life. It's just not my style. Just throwing that out there, Hillary. Just throwing that out there. Zach, you're getting ahead of me because that's exactly where I'm going. These companies, the ones that I'm talking about specifically tonight, Apple, Google, YouTube, which is owned by Google, Spotify, Twitter, Facebook, so on and so forth, that have suddenly these companies that have suddenly, through collusion, I would actually go so far as to say that what they've done is they have conspired to commit a crime, and that crime is essentially false imprisonment. It's what these companies have done to people like Alex Jones and a very long line. Zach, I'm an insurance broker. We're good. We got this. I mean, I don't do it much anymore, but I still own a brokerage. Anyway, what they have done is not functionally different than false imprisonment. They have stripped the right to free speech away from a private individual, from a long list of private individuals. Yes, you are, dear. So much. But let's go back to that hypothetical. Assume for a moment, forget about Donald Trump, collusion and all that, just take Russia. Because there is the accusation that, quite separately from any facts surrounding Donald Trump's involvement, knowledge of, or complicity with Russian interference, that Russia interfered in the elections. But how did they interfere? To what extent did they interfere? We know that they were unable to access and alter any votes. At least that's the party line. We are told that, not that there is no evidence that votes were changed, but that votes were not changed. And we're down to 4 viewers. Where'd everybody go? Did I get boring or repetitive or something? Do I need to say the fuck word more often? Are we not laughing enough? Am I not vulgar enough? Do I need to expand my vocabulary of vulgarity so I sound more like Bering or Sargon? Anyway, let's assume for a moment that everything that the Russians are actually accused of... Hey, we got 2 more viewers! Howdy! That everything the Russians are accused of actually happened. Let's just assume that they did the things that they are tangibly, evidentially accused of. That is that this there's the only accusations for which any evidence has been produced at all. Okay, that they bought 100. I can't believe I'm about to say this. I can't say it with a straight face. The thing that the Russians are accused of having done is buying $100,000. $100,000 in Facebook ads for a misinformation campaign. $100,000. $100,000 on a misinformation campaign in a U.S. presidential election. I looked these numbers up I looked these numbers up back when the campaigns were wrapping up and the Donald was winning. He spent like a tenth or less of what Hillary spent, but Hillary's campaign cost billions. The Russians, the greatest threat to modern humanity, spent 100,000, maybe a couple of 100,000 with a couple of different companies on Facebook ads and Twitter stuff. That's what they did. That's how they interfered. That's how they stole your election. That is being called election tampering, election interference. So what do we call it when private U.S. companies select on a clearly partisan basis with thin excuses the voices of one party and target them for censorship and removal in a clearly coordinated attack? Alex Jones was perma-banned from Twitter, Facebook, the Apple Podcast Store, SoundCloud, Spotify, Facebook, and basically everybody except for Minds.com, Gab, and BitChute. Oh, and then Vimeo chimed in like anybody gives two shits about Vimeo anymore. Vimeo was relevant almost long enough for me to learn about it before it became irrelevant. But that is an active coordinated attack. Dana Lash has had her social media tampered with and some of it banned. Then there's the H3 guys. The H3 guys who are not political guys. I mean, I'd be surprised if most of you even know who they are. I'm only aware of them because I saw one of their videos a couple of years ago, and I was aware of them because they had done a video which I found very interesting, where they had chosen to suspend they had a Patreon account that was bringing them in a huge amount of money, like 30 or 40,000 a month or something. I mean, they were making a huge amount of money on their Patreon. And then all of a sudden, they got to where their viewership on YouTube and the revenue from advertising had gotten high, and they suspended their Patreon, and they did this video where they basically said, to you, the fans, we love you so much. Thank you so much for all you've done to support the development of our channel. Boom, boom, boom. And they suspended their Patreon account and just stopped taking donations from their viewers and just kept producing their free content. So H3 was streaming live right after the Alex Jones banning, and they talked about Alex Jones being banned. And while they were talking about it, I shit you not, go look this one up. This one's scary. While this group, who were basically comedians that don't do politics, they were talking about the banning of Alex Jones during a live stream. Their live stream got shut down while they were live streaming and pulled from the platform, and they got a community strike for it. Stefan Molyneux just got a bunch of community strikes. Steven Crowder, and the list goes on. These community strikes come and they'll say some generic crap like, you violated our terms of service. Okay, in what way? How were the terms of service violated? What can I do to remedy this, or to avoid this in the future? No. Just generic. Sometimes they call it hate speech. But for somebody to be banned off all social media without an inciting event, it's not like he had just released some new big controversial video that got a bunch of retweets and was clearly, had a particular triggering event. It's not like he had a new gay frogs conspiracy that day. Just in a span of about 8 to 10 hours, everybody banned him at once. And of course, we've heard from Zuckerberg. I'm sorry. We've heard from Zuckerberg that that was definitely a decision that was made at the top. That they were actively involved in that. And so that's absolutely a case of straight up collusion. The powers that be got together and decided to assault that person and eliminate that person. We're, 75 days out from the midterm election, from the actual election? That sounds like collusion, election tampering. I might even go so far as to call it campaign fraud. In fact, I would like to call it campaign fraud, because unlike collusion, that's actually a crime. And that crime is being committed by large organizations who are funded by our government. So I am being forced at gunpoint to support causes that I not only oppose morally, but which seek to murder me. And there is no hyperbole in my statement here. The Democrat National Committee actively supported the Occupy Wall Street movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Ku Klux Klan, Antifa, the Black Bloc. They refused to denounce the violence that's committed by these organizations. And these are people who want people that look like me to die. And in fact, they include people who actively want to kill people who look like me. And frankly, a lot of you guys. I am having my money funneled out of my pocket at gunpoint into the pockets of people who seek to murder me. Think about that. Process that. Tell people about that. And here's what I'm going to close with. I mentioned this last week, but since Rod said Jones did have some coot crap going on, okay. Most of you guys that watch my show, you probably agree with Alex Jones politically on the majority of his actual political positions, stated political positions. The gay frogs thing, atrazine is actually a dangerous chemical. Part of the reason we're aware that atrazine is a dangerous chemical is because of scientists noticing cases where the presence of atrazine caused spontaneous gender redesignation in certain amphibians. Alex Jones screaming, "They're turning the frickin' frogs gay," screaming it. He made a joke. He made a punchline out of an actual serious issue. But the funny thing about Alex Jones' claim that the frogs are being turned gay by chemicals, that they're putting water into chemicals to put their gay frogs. Here's a funny thing, though. Atrazine is a thing. Spontaneous amphibian gender reassignment is a thing. Those things actually happen. There is literally more evidence to support the conspiracy theories of Alex Jones than there is to support the conspiracy theories of CNN and MSNBC and all those other networks whom combined apparently cannot outdraw Fox News for viewership now. There is more evidence to suggest that that they're putting chemicals in the water to turn the frogs gay. And I can't believe I'm saying that out loud, but it's actually the truth. There's actually real substantiated evidence for that. Unlike the claims from CNN that Donald Trump colluded with Russia, or that airplanes are randomly swallowed up by black holes, and that's why we don't find the wreckage. Don Lemon. You inane, nattering shitburger. Alright. I think I'm gonna go ahead and bring it down there. It's already after 9. I ran you guys over a half hour last week. Who knows? Maybe I'll take a page from the Rush Institute and start doing a 3-hour show later. We'll get there. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week at 8 o'clock on Sunday evening. And until then, remember. Saturday. Next week, Saturday at 8 o'clock. So, same time, day before. And I'll still do the 8 o'clock show on Sunday. But Saturday at 8, it's 2000, Zach. Next week, we're going to do the live watch premiere of our first film review. It's good stuff. I'm still cutting it. So much footage. Plan on it being about a 1-hour show. Because the film review itself, I'm trying to get it under 40 minutes, and then we'll hang out and talk about it a little bit. And we might hang out and talk, as long as you guys are hanging out and willing to chit-chat. But I'm going to do, basically, I'll go live here. I'll show you guys the film review thing. And then that will be the first video that goes up on our alternate channel, the Film Academy. So, check that out. And then, starting, I think the following weekend, we're going to be dropping one long-form film review per month until we can kind of build up the catalog and start doing 2 a month. But one long-form film review a month and 1 or 2 short-form immediate reaction film reviews. So the long-form stuff will be something that's out, probably something that's old, like Predator's an old classic. We dig into it and really kind of examine and discuss the metaphors and the mythology around it, and how there's a little more depth to it than just being a straight-up action flick. In fact, there's a lot more depth to it than being a straight-up action flick. And then the short-form reviews are going to be us hitting the movie theater. When a movie comes out, we'll be there for like a matinee, and then we'll go back after the next showing after we saw. So we'll go see a showing, and then the next showing starts, and we'll be in a cafe or something nearby. And when the showing after the one we saw lets out, we will have already recorded our first takes, our immediate responses, and then we'll catch the people as they're coming out of the show and ask the man on the street what he thought of it. So, until next week, if you build a man a fire, you keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night. I'll see you next Saturday. Thank you.